Good afternoon, everyone. Just verifying. Dan, can you give me the thumbs up if you can see my screen, okay?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started now that it is now 2 o'clock. So welcome back, or welcome if you're only able to just be joining us. So we are going to pass things over to our next presenter for session two, which is Introduction to the CCSQ Centralized Data Repository. And I'm going to go to our next slide. So this session is going to be led by Dan Anderson. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to him to give more info and kick things off for his presentation. Just a quick administrative reminder that this session is being recorded, and all session materials, recordings, anything like notebooks, will be available after our event wraps. Just give us a couple days to turn that around. So at this point, Dan, if I'm not mistaken, you wanted to share your screen, correct?
Um, sure.
Or I can go through the deck. Totally, whatever works
No,
best
it's
for you.
probably easier for me to do it. I had
Okay.
just closed it though, but I will.
Let me know when you're ready, and I can certainly pass things over.
I am ready.
All right.
I'm sure. Perfect. You see everything fine?
Yep, looks good.
All right, great. Well, my name is Dan Anderson, and I want to welcome you to my session on the introduction to the CCSQ Centralized Data Repository. I'm a staff data scientist with the QDAS project. I've been on this project now for 2 years. And my background is in SAS, as well as Spark, Python, R, definitely much more on the technical side. And I will tell you that this presentation is the presentation I wish I had received when I first onboarded. Likewise, I will have to say that it will hopefully answer some people's questions about the big picture and the architecture without offending too many people, because I had to generalize things, and including my team of QDAS contractors who have done amazing work, and yet I am completely overlooking their contributions. The my assumptions of this audience are that basically you come into working with the CDR for one of three aims. You've either come from like a program centric mentality where you're a program manager or a project manager, or stakeholder, uh, or you are a data contributor, or compile the data sets, or you're a data analyst and you're just using the data, or writing all the code to do the production pipelines. Either way, we're all using the same space, and yet we don't really have a common understanding unless you happen to have been on the project for a long time. So my primary objectives are to really address, and you should know the principal business needs for the CCSQ centralized data repository. I want you to understand how the centralized data repository meets the CCSQ business needs, and then have some familiarity with the systems that support this centralized data repository. As with everything else in the government, there are going to be lots of acronyms. I'm going to try to spell them out, at least the first time you come across them. And if not, if you have any questions, please ping the chat and we will get you responses. So bottom line up front, it's probably not a big surprise to any of you. The CCSQ CDR is more than just a centralized data repository. Although that is the primary purpose of it, as being a centralized data repository for the Center for Clinical Standards and Quality, it actually has evolved beyond that in certain ways. And we're going to talk about why that evolution has had to occur and how that really still meets the principal aims and needs of the CDR. My presentation outline will be, I'll first talk about the problem statement, look at some historical iterations of the CDR, and we'll talk about data offerings of the CDR, particularly our partners, some CDR compute and analytics offerings that we focus on, and then, of course, highlight some of the supporting systems and support resources for all of our users, regardless of whether you're, just accessing the data or writing extensive, code, or just, have to be familiar with it so you can write something about it in a proposal. We want everybody to be able to have a fairly decent understanding of everything that we are providing. So for those of you who don't know, CCSQ has a functional statement that outlines 12 primary aims. And in aims 1, 3, and 12, they talk about things that require data. So whether it's, they're the focal point for quality, clinical, medical science issues, survey and certifications and policies, developing tests, evaluate, and adopts and supports performance measurements systems to evaluate care provided, identifying new and innovative approaches. Each of these things require data and create lots of data. So that is the first problem that CCSQ has to deal with several years back. And I think any responsible data user recognizes that if you need and create a lot of data, then you need to have you need to really address two primary concerns of data expenses with the data storage. You don't want to have duplicate data sitting all over the place. And also looking at data responsibilities, particularly data security and data integrity. So the thought for the solution for this is, well, how about we host the data in one location? That way we've reduced the expenses of data redundancies and data transfer processing, and also can improve our data security by reducing the number of vulnerabilities, such as different hosting locations or different best practices, and also increase our focus for security diligence. So great, we're going to have everyone come to the data. Well, what does that actually then mean for our users? If CCSQ wants everyone to come to the data, then what does CCSQ need to provide for the users of the CDR? We recognize the need for data sources. Obviously, they need their inputs to be supported. But also they need some analytics capabilities, because if you're not going to let them extract the data, then they need to be able to do the analysis. So along with the analytic capabilities come compute resources, as well as the statistical tools. Well, so there are several iterations we're going to look at. But each of them will call out like a user, a data and compute host location, some database types, compute resource, analytic tools, and then also some variability in file upload and download. Well, before my time, I hear of stories of the Baltimore data center. So it used to be that there was a government data center, and it hosted an Oracle database, and everybody ran ran base SAS or SAS Enterprise Guide on Unix servers. Interesting thing about this was like, well, how was your file upload and download, honestly, it was an extension of the government network. So it was already behind all the firewalls and all that was, so that bypassed some of the concerns that we have to face nowadays. But that was an early iteration. And then, of course, government and everybody started moving to the cloud. So we do a cloud migration. And here, call out that, we have federal employees and CMS contractors that would access the FedRAMP certified AWS cloud environment, where data would be stored as a Hadoop structure in Ambari, and you would have Spree servers that would host SaaS via. And then periodically, if you had like some data file or you had to upload or download, you could use FileCloud. Here, basically everything was still SaaS because that's what they had been using before. That's an oversimplification, but it was primarily SaaS in this environment. Unfortunately, with this system, it wasn't ideal for what we were trying to do. The SaaS environment wasn't as stable as we needed to be, and it was coming to end of life. And SaaS wanted to change everything, including licensing agreements and processing, and it just wasn't what was sustainable for the everybody else. So CCSQ decided, well, how can we create a better environment? And so here we come about a year and a half ago. We swapped out, the Ambari for a Databricks catalog. We swapped out SaaS for basically Databricks, and we swapped out the Spree servers for compute clusters. We'll talk a little bit more about the variety of compute clusters that we have, including SQL Warehouse, all-purpose compute, as well as job. Databricks being able to, using Spark is primarily focusing on, and as well as Python and R. So more open source tools and libraries. And then when we do need to upload and download into the environment, we use Unified File Manager. It's basically a rebranding of FileCloud. And that's kind of where we're at a very high level. One of the things that we want to talk about is, all right, well, in this Databricks catalog, what exactly are we providing? Well, I wanted to talk about the types of offerings we have as well as who they're coming from. So first, I'll start on the right-hand side here. At the bottom, we'll talk about each organization. You'll have your schema within the data catalog, where you can store your structured data, right? You've got CCSQ data products, CMS, like external of CCSQ, but other CMS data products. And then, of course, we also have some additional CDR supplemental data products. Most of these offerings are brought in a number of manners. One is, one common method is using this bring your own data mentality, where we allow data owners to connect and push their data into the CDR data catalog schema. We have other refreshes where we do a periodic data pull, where a CDR team will connect to the data owner's data location and pull a snapshot of their data into the CDR data catalog. Occasionally, there's periodic file deliveries, where data owners will securely deliver a static data file to the CDR team for upload. And then there are, one of the things we've most recently rolled out is this occasion for personal connector. We were using it with the IDR for Part C data, where users are able to use a connector to another data owner's content and pull the data that they need into the CDR for their own work. So I want to touch a base. We'll touch a bit more on each of these data sources that come into us. So organization schema, right? You have organization specific data. So typically you'll start with one dedicated data catalog schema per organization. Or, the definition of organization. It can be more project centric, but one dedicated data catalog schema per organization to store all your structured data. And that can include your inputs, your intermediate tables, as well as your outputs. Of course, this isn't the only way you can store your data. You can also store it in an unstructured manner, or have your unstructured data can be stored in your organization's S3 workbench. Next, we'll talk about CCSQ CDR data products. So CCSQ, other CCSQ programs that contribute their data into the CDR include EQRS, HQR, QPP, iKeys, QMARS, BFCC, and please forgive me if I happen to have, I believe these are all CCSQ, but I'm not as well versed on your CMS side and CCSQ. But all of these really come from one of those four methods. Usually it's them pushing the data in for us, or us collecting a snapshot and keeping those up to date. Moving on, we have data partnerships. So, the NCH data, that's not CCSQ specific, but it needs to be used frequently. So we have part A and B. We use the master data management system for pulling in beneficiary in the cloud, and part D data. We're now using the integrated data repository with a connector to access NCH part C. Other groups that have partnered with us or allow us to share their data with us include CCW, the chronic conditions data warehouse, with master beneficiary summary files, Medicare, Bayesian improved surname, geocoding, and BISG, and then also MedPAR. So, this is not by far not an exhaustive list of data partnerships, as well as CCSQ products that exist within the environment. But these are an idea of all the teams that are working with us to keep to provide the best environment, and where you access all the data that you need to be able to also do all your calculations based off of it. I will also say that since some of these come from like direct connections from other teams, the QDAS team doesn't necessarily know the best answer for like the details about that data and how it was created. But we do usually have a contact that we can reach out to try to answer your questions. So if you ever wonder why we seem so stumped, we've got all these different data sources and all these different data partners that we're working with. And some of them are just kind enough to let us host their data in here. There have been occasions where there's additional data that needs to be added. Usually it's public data sources. And so we have one of our teams that will pull in from external websites, like download the files and host them within the CDR. So some of those include like Compare Nursing Home, the FDA National Drug and Code Directory, zip codes, files, things like that. A lot of work and a lot of connections that our QDAS team is doing at all times. And we're just going to completely glaze over the fact that they do that for the most part without any serious issues. All right, so that's our data offerings. What about, that was one part of what the CDR had to do, right? One business need was to host all the data that a user may need. The next thing is, well, they need to provide compute resources and tools to be able to perform the analytics. In our Databricks environment, Databricks is a distributed compute clusters. The primary benefit of Databricks is the fact that it leverages Spark for distributed calculations and compute work. We host, as we've mentioned before, we have all-purpose or interactive data or compute clusters where you can take a subset of your final product or a subset of your inputs, test it out, create the code as you think you're going to need it. And then once you've tested it out, it seems to be working for everything, then you can move it into a Databricks job cluster. Job clusters will allow you to set, schedules on it. It also is a lighter weight cluster, and so it is able to have more dedicated resource towards the actual calculations and not focusing on a lot of your UI like interfaces and constant displays. We also have SQL warehouses, which serve a behind the scenes purpose. Pretty much any of you who have been using SAS in the last year and accessing Databricks or accessing data that's in the CDR data catalog, you've been unknowingly using SQL warehouses the entire time. There are additional uses for it that we can discuss in other training sessions, but primarily we all use the all-purpose computes and then the Databricks job computes. The Databricks jobs and all-purpose compute clusters allow us to use Python, R, and Scala. I believe there may be one or two people who do Scala, but it's not a commonly requested support from us. As I mentioned, Databricks Analytics is really focused on distributed compute by the Apache Software Foundation Spark. So that's an open source compute, distributed compute software or framework, and then you have Spark SQL, PySpark, Sparkly R. There's even a Pandas on Spark. All of those are Spark specific, just different languages that leverage or different, basically different syntax that leverages the same underlying functions. By using Python and R and having our computes like this, we're opening up to some open source libraries. So anything that's published in the CRAN repository can be loaded onto your compute cluster. So anything in the PyPy repository can also be added, and Maven repositories. You may not have been aware of it when we were doing shared clusters. We had preloaded some Maven clusters, some Maven libraries, and I believe one of my colleagues will address that again later. Finally, I wanted to talk about, well, what are all the teams that are supporting this? So there's a lot of teams, and sadly, I don't really know all these acronyms. I know there are different teams that we work with, so, and different contracts. So for example, STAR works on making sure that QuickSight, that the content that is in your schemas in CDR is accessible to QuickSight and can be used by QuickSight. Unified File Manager, UFM, This is a product that's supported by another CCSQ team, but is frequently used to establish a network folder connection to your S3 workbench. This is a way that you can upload some data files from a local compute, like on your local computer, up to your S3 workbench, and then be able to access it and use that content in your analytics work. In the opposite direction, you can use UFM network folder connections to download certain reports if you have to deliver certain reports. We will have AIM speaking later this afternoon, talking about their support for SAS to Pi. As we recognize that a lot of people have had to move, since we are going to have an end of life to SAS. All these people, all of our user base, to the best of their ability, has had to pick up Spark, whether that's Python or R or SQL, and learn how to write the SAS content into Python or PySpark. There is a tool that helps with that conversion that AIM has supported and made available for our users. And they'll be talking later. Of course, frequently we'll say you have to have permissions for a lot of stuff, and a lot of different pieces. So you have to have permissions to the CDR or Databricks, and HARP and ESS are heavily involved in managing our UFM permissions and managing the permissions to Databricks. One thing that's very important is, with all these different data resources that are available in the CDR, ensuring that only the right people are accessing the right data sources. So the EPI and portal, the data and analytics portal, have an integrated process that automatically processes your data use agreements and distributes the rules appropriately to ensure that other systems grant you proper access to the data that you ought to be accessing, and ensures that you're not accessing data that you shouldn't be. And finally, of course, CCOM helping us with all of our AWS networks. I wish I could show you how daunting the architectural structure is behind the scenes. I'm always impressed by the work that our teams are doing. But I think that, this will suffice a basic understanding of what we're providing in what we may consider as the CDR versus the CDR environment. And what I want to highlight here is, at the top, you'll see that you have your users, and they're, HARP and ESS grant access to the CDR environment. The personal computes in the center over here, you've got your all-purpose, you've got your job and your SQL warehouse. These compute clusters are working with AIM, is allowing them to be able to have access to SAS to Pi and all the support work that SAS to Pi has provided for our user base. All of your cluster, your compute cluster access to the CDR data. This section would definitely be what I would consider your centralized data repository, the data content of it being managed by EPI and Portal. Likewise, EPI Portal is also helping with your permissions to the S3 workbenches. If you need to upload a data file or output a report, UFM is handling this connection to S3 workbench. And of course, all of our data partners and and CCSQ programs that are connecting or allowing us to connect, or in one way or another providing data into the CDR. It's all here. And of course, and then also STAR, allowing us to meet needs of QuickSight and users who need to use QuickSight. This is an oversimplification. I'm sure I've offended lots of people with the oversimplifying of the process. But I do hope that as a business user, this architectural diagram is sufficient to help you understand what is the CDR, what has it evolved into, who is involved in all of these pieces, and the level of effort that CCSQ is trying to support so that all of you can do the work that you need to be doing. Leads us into talking about support resources. So for system usage, we have Training Hub in the portal. So that includes some knowledge base articles that discuss the different features that we have and frequently asked questions. There are also live and recorded training sessions. We have office hours that are usually 1 hour long. If the content is more appropriate to be like 30 minutes, then we do have lunch and learns. And then we have interactive sessions, which are kind of like a lab course if you're back in college and wanted to have hands-on computer lab time. That's what our interactive sessions are. And we set aside an hour for those. Also, content like these data camps will be provided in these recorded sessions, and you can find those within Training Hub. We have Code Commons, which is our way of ensuring that our training presentation content is kept up to date. So as things change within our system, we're able to update the code and make sure it's kind of evergreen for you to be able to copy paste out of those code blocks. And we will also usually have examples that include our best practices. I will put the caveat that Code Commons is in process of updating their content, but all of the office hours content has been up to date. We're restructuring some of the former data camp work, as well as some of the demos. Anybody with access to Databricks will have access to see the Code Commons. It is behind a password, password protected in Portal, but that's available to all users. Common questions that we get are about the content of our data, of the data that we host. We have long been struggling with this data catalog that's hosted on Confluence. And as best as we attempt to keep that up to date, it is pretty static, each piece. They are rolling out, they're starting initial tests in the next few weeks to roll out what's going to be an interactive data hub. That, look forward to hearing more about that in the future. Very excited about that product. We'll be able to help people explore more with the data, the metadata itself, and what your data contents are. If you happen to have other needs, more support that CCSQ offers. They're offering on their Slack channel. I kind of have this in order of like who you should go to first. Other needs, first of all, try to go to a colleague. They're going to be able to answer you quicker than anybody else. If nobody else is there, try reaching out to the Slack community. Putting stuff out on the data analytics channel allows for some collaboration, but also the stuff you put out there, we're constantly looking at it. Katie's looking at it. People are responding to that content. And, if they don't directly respond to you, they're at least making notes, and usually they're responsive. If that's not sufficient for you, we have the CCSQ Service Center. These hyperlinks will take you to the instructions and portal, but you can either submit a ticket directly or go through the Slack channel to submit a ticket for help desk support that will go to our tier 2 and tier 3 engineers on varying teams within the, each of the specific teams that will be able to address your issue. And finally, if you happen to have something that you need, but you can't find, you can reach out to CCSQ data and analytics requests. These are typically additional services or features that you've seen that you think should be available and they aren't, or that you'd like to have, like to just, get further information on, and that will trigger that process. One thing I like to call out is what is our process for adding new features or training material to our system? So how are future CDR feature developments determined? If you'll notice, for the CDR, we use Databricks, but if you go through the documentation of Databricks, you'll see that our version isn't actually the latest or even complete version of what Databricks would prefer. We are in that process based on where we were before and where we're getting to. It's a number of steps. One of those big steps was the Unity catalog transition, which we just completed over the past weekend. But if you do see features that are supposed to exist, or Databricks seems to support, bring those up to CCSQ stakeholders. You can do it as a DAR, you can do it as just a help desk, something in the data and analytics channel. All these new efforts are really prioritized by CCSQ stakeholders based on the value to the overall community and resource availability. So if we find that there's a feature that it has a huge demand for it, those are obviously going to be things that we focus on first. Some of you may remember early on with the Databricks transition work, we had separate compute clusters for Python work and for R work. And even then, the R work wasn't able to directly connect to the data catalog. That was a feature that was of important demand, and we prioritized it as based on all the other work that we were doing with the infrastructures. But those types of things are things that CCSQ and Katie and all of her colleagues keep in mind when trying to determine what we should work on next. Likewise, I'm part of the user services team. We focus on creating training content. How do we determine what training topics we focus on next? Honestly, it's based on community feedback or our perception of community needs. Our perception of community needs usually means we kind of look at, well, what are some frequent help desk issues that we've been seeing? But that's just our best guess. We are frequently asking for community feedback, so please provide your feedback to us of training topics, things that are unclear. We may point you back to saying, oh, we've actually have discussed this, it's just not very well organized yet, and we are going through a reorganization of our training content in the near future, so we can point you into the right direction for that. But if it hasn't been addressed adequately to meet your needs, please let us know. We can revisit those things in a lunch and learn session. Again, I know there are some exciting conversations about the capabilities of Databricks in doing like machine learning work. We have one of my colleagues will be presenting later about how we can start to leverage some of that machine learning work, but also some other features that may, basically I'm just saying, please let us know, because otherwise we're just guessing based on help desk content. In conclusion, a nice, simple, tight 40 minutes. Hopefully it wasn't I kept it concise enough. But the principal CCSQ needs for the CDR were to have secure data storage and availability for CCSQ data and its CMS partner data. Understanding how the CDR meets the CCSQ needs, really, we did this through focusing on secure data catalogs with automated DUA enforcement, and supplementing, additional data where possible and where resources allowed us to start to introduce those new data sets. As Miriam referred to earlier, we're constantly trying to introduce new data through stable pipelines so that you can have it available to you directly in the CDR and accessible to all of your compute clusters. I did want to call out, some familiarity with external systems that are supporting the CDR, such as UFM, HARP, ESS, EPI, and Portal, to name a few. Obviously, the AIM and STAR and many others that work closely with us to help give you the product that you need. And with that, I will leave it open to questions.
It does look like we have gotten a few in the chat at this point. Some have already been answered by the team, but a few have not been. So one is, will the code comments have any indication when a previous suggestion... Oh, sorry. Someone responded and it bumped the question. So will the code comments have any indication when a previous suggestion no longer applies, and why, so we know how to adjust our usage of previous guidance?
So when things change in our system, such as right now talking about like Unity Catalog, one of the biggest changes that you'll find with Unity Catalog is if you happen to have used the 3-name structure with your catalogs, where it's like hive underscore metastore dot for what was it, CDR, and then dot your schema, or no, sorry, hive metastore dot schema dot your table name, right? The new transition has changed it from hive metastore to CDR underscore prod. Those types of changes will be implemented into our code base, into like the code commons updated code bases. I will be honest, I don't believe we address why in those particular instances. Although there are also communications and stuff in the portal, like knowledge-based changes and stuff that will address the fact that, that change had to happen. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Okay. They just responded and said yes. Okay, so the next one, Dan, did you say our code on Databricks cannot access CDR prod catalog, or did I get that wrong?
It couldn't. Long time ago. Well, not that long ago, probably about 8-10 months ago. It wasn't able to. It was something that required additional infrastructure changes and a lot of additional work by our amazing DevOps teams. And so out of the box in the current structure that we had, we could easily bring PySpark and Python, but R and Sparkly R was not supported. I was using it as an example of looking at overall value to the whole community in prioritizing feature efforts. That became a very high priority effort.
Okay, for a schema with our organization name, do we have full control to set up permissions?
I have to double check. You have control to create and drop tables and do whatever you need to do with the content in there, but not to modify permissions from others.
Yeah, I can help out, Dan. Like you said, you have full control of the tables, but you do not have full control at the schema level at this time, due to obviously data access and data governance permissions, and potential security concerns there. It is on the roadmap to have more of a self-service offering within the CDR, with the ability to generate your own schemas, the ability to publish and share your own data, with other users and or organizations slash groups. However, at this time, at the schema level, there's a lot of security vulnerabilities within Databricks if we are to open up ownership to the groups. So again, you do have ownership of tables where you can grant proper privileges to other users and groups for that schema or for that table. However, the users in the groups need to have proper rules in place in order to actually access that schema in the first place. So again, self-service is on the roadmap in the future to be able to allow for the flexibility of this sharing, but currently it would have to go through more of a data access request to add rules for certain organizations to have access to specific schemas or specific tables within schemas, as fine-grained access control is a feature that does come with our ability of getting onto Unity Catalog that we are moving towards in the very, very near future.
Okay, thanks. Just double checking that there's none. Oh, I see a system.ai schema with a lot of current AI models. Is that available for use now?
Uh, we haven't fleshed out that piece of the systems tables. And I don't know how, Derek, I think you're probably better to speak to this, or I could do some research and get back to you.
Yeah. At this current time, the system catalog, I don't believe has been opened up it's opened, the catalog is opened up, but I'm not sure about the schemas and the access at the schema levels. I honestly, off the top of my head, I am not familiar with exactly what models are in there and the different level of access given. My best guess would be that that functionality has not been opened up quite yet. Again, auto ML within Databricks is on the near future roadmap now that we have migrated over to single user clusters and into the Unity catalog. A lot of those were sort of prerequisites to be able to now begin opening up a lot more of what Databricks has to offer from functionalities and features within Databricks.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek. Okay, so at this point, I think we are good to go ahead and wrap up session 2 and move over to our break. And then just verifying that you can see my screen again.
Yes.
I should have the same question slide
Yep.
up. Okay, cool. Thanks, Dan. So big shout out to Dan and all of our participants and our great questions. Thank you so much. And also thank you to Derek who helped answer some of those questions and the rest of the team who was helping in the chat as well. So our next session is going to be best practices in Databricks, and that's going to be with Katie at 3 o'clock. It will be a slightly shorter session. So please join us back in about 9-10 minutes so we can kick that off. So please feel free to go ahead and take a short break. Thanks so much.